Yes, I'm back. No, my hair isn't braided. Yes, I don't care. Once again, Big Said, industry cosign. If this is your first time here, welcome. The forum, my friends are better than yours. Briefly, I've been doing this for so many years. And even though I have celebrity friends, I hate speaking to celebrities. But if they become my friends, then I don't consider them celebrities anymore. But like I said, my friends are better than yours. I have a guest. Every time I always say I have a special guest, but all my guests are special, so it doesn't matter for me to say special guest anyway. But I have a guy I've known for about well, I ain't gonna say how many years, but we've known each other for some
Woo.
time.
Yeah, a long
Too
time.
long, too long.
We,
But
yeah, brother, we go back.
many of you, I'm sure, will recognize him, and if you don't recognize him, you're showing your age, and it's okay. But T Money from Long Island.
Yep, Strong Island representing all day, every day, baby. T Money, Strong Island, T Money, original concept, T Money, the 510 family, T Money, BAU, T Money, original concept, MTV Raps,
Too,
WBLS.
too many things.
Woo. Yeah, a
Yeah.
lot of things, man. And now the T Money podcast joint on YouTube. That's where we are right now. What's up, Big Sad? What's happening, man? I'm here, man. I'm psyched. I'm here on your show.
I'm trying.
This is like role reversal. This is like role reversal right now.
I'm trying to be like you, but with hair. No.
Facts, facts. But I'm compensating. That's why I grow the beard. You see me?
I
So
see. I like the gray because
yeah, yeah.
I'm trying to do the gray, and
Hey, look here.
I can't wait till I
That's
get
what it
gray
is, bro.
over. You know, people try to get away from their gray. I'm trying to, and I embrace my grays. So especially this,
Yeah, like we all should, man. We all should, man. What you gonna do? You're gonna keep
exactly.
dying it?
I
Nah,
would
that's
never
corny.
do that. Never.
That's
I
funny.
might dye gray.
I know. But listen, real talk. You got a minute? Let me tell you the story. So I tried to dye my
Wow.
grays, right? At first, I wasn't embracing the shit. I always had a gray. I always had a beard. Had a beard back when I was on Yo. Sure, I had facial hair. Dr. Dre used to tease me. I had facial hair in eighth grade. I had mustache in eighth grade. So but I never really embraced my grays. Listen to this. You hear me? So I was dying it when I first grew up back said I was dying it. My G. And I don't know what happened. I had an adverse effect to the dye. My G, my face swolled up, son. I was looking like I don't know, like I had some kind of growth under my skin. B, I was looking oh, like one of those monsters that you would see in like one of the horror movies. I was really like bugging right there. I didn't know what to do. I started to go to the doctor, but it wore off after a couple of days, and needless to say, that was the last time I put it on my face.
That was
So
God.
I had no choice but to embrace the grades after that.
I bet you did too.
There's no question. It was well received. So I said I played myself in the beginning, so it was whatever. So I rocked the grades, and I learned that you got to embrace your age at times.
I'm gonna tell you what's funny. When I was younger, I used to see the distinguished gentlemen, the older men with the gray hair,
Right.
and I said I didn't want to rush my childhood, but I was waiting
Mm-hmm.
for me to get my grays so that way I can look distinguished like the older
Really?
gentlemen. And
Oh, that's
it took a
interesting.
while, but I'm finally here. And
That's
it's funny
truly
because
interesting.
I think when I was 8 years old, I had one gray hair, literally. But it stayed that way until I was in like my 30s, and then it started spreading. Then I had a little patch, and I was like,
Oh
"Yes,
wow.
again." And it's finally, and it still hasn't spread as you can see because it's only right here in my face. Yeah,
Right.
but it took me years to even get this little bit of gray, hair on my face. Period. So
Wow.
I definitely embraced my grays, before
Well,
I
that's cool.
got them. So, like
That's
you
super
said,
cool, bro.
I had
Yeah,
people
I,
that
I
would
embrace it. I was
it was
forced
good
to, 'cause my face looked like a pumpkin. I didn't understand what was going on, you know, but it's
I,
all good.
I can't wait until, and I get gray hairs on the hair. And it's like, I don't like gray hair. I want it over here. But anyway,
Well, then
um,
that's why they make razor blades, bro. You can shave that off.
but I just embrace it. But this is about you,
Fact.
not our grades. So thank you for appearing, and congratulations on you still being around, because we're in an industry where after 3 months, you might miss that cycle, and that's it for you. So
Yeah,
congratulations.
that's a fact. I appreciate that, and it's very difficult to try to stay relevant in this culture. And I guess we'll get around to talking about the culture itself. But I try to continuously push the envelope. You
Yeah,
know,
have to.
and I try to, when it comes to everything in my life, I try to push the envelope, man. I try to constantly reinvent myself. I try to constantly think in terms of how I can, you know, stay, you know, active in the culture that I love so dearly. You understand? So, I do say, and a lot of times you do things, man. Like, I had failed businesses, and a lot of times you do things and they don't necessarily, they don't gain any traction. They don't yield any fruit, right? But you got to keep trying. You definitely have to keep trying, and you have to position yourself mentally and physically and financially. Find yourself in that place so you can leapfrog into something.
Definitely.
A lot of us said, as you well know, that we don't put that combination together well. We might have the mental drive to do it, but we might be of ill health, or we might not have any money because yeah, the industry don't pay shit. You know what I mean? You know how it go. So um, so you have to try to keep those three things in line. You have to
Definitely.
do what you have to do, right?
But and not to get all into the culture aspect yet, but
Right,
the one thing that we do have in common is the love of hip hop. And we grew up during the same time. You might be about
right.
14 years older than me. Um, but I grew up in the Bronx. So
Right.
anytime I have a conversation about hip hop in general, because regardless of how we started within the hip hop, there's
Hmm.
different factors saying hip hop started wherever. But being that the commercialization of hip hop, started in the Bronx, But like I said, that's a conversation for another day. But growing up in New York is definitely a factor, because hip hop definitely has its roots in so many different places. But hip hop is where we feel it started. And when I say we, I mean everybody, because I don't care what anybody says where it started. I'm going to say it started in New York, because that's where I found it. But for you
Right.
living in Long Island, which is definitely geographically we're close, but realistically, like Long Island is definitely a ways from the Bronx. So how did hip hop seep into your life, and when did you decide to make it not just a lifestyle but a career? Because it's two different things, and we both know that you can definitely live hip hop, but there are people that's living hip hop that hasn't made it a career, and vice versa. How did hip hop seep into your soul where it became you as far as T Money and your career? Because we had different paths, and you were actually a rapper, you were actually a recording artist. But let the people know that may
Yeah.
not know your start as a
I
career.
mean, Long Island. The five boroughs: Long Island, Mount Vernon. You know, it's not like it's not like Long Island is Connecticut, or is even
Well, to me, it was at
down
the
in
time.
South Jersey, or even like in a whole nother state of Virginia or Detroit. It's when that pebble was thrown, and I relate to that pebble as the beginnings of the culture, right? When that pebble was thrown, it was in its infancy stages, right? So when you throw a pebble in the ocean or the water, there's ripple effects, right? So it just rippled, it rippled through the five boroughs, right? You've seen it in Harlem, you've seen it in the Bronx, you've seen it in Queens, you've seen it. So the natural progression of it was to go to Long Island, was to go to New Jersey, was to go to Connecticut, because it kept rippling.
Yeah,
As it kept growing, it kept expanding. So due to the fact that Long Island, I mean, to be honest, I mean, Long Island is in very close proximity to Brooklyn. I mean, you don't have to cross a bridge to go into Brooklyn from Long Island, nor do you have to cross a bridge to go from Queens to Long Island. I mean, they're connected bodies of land.
yeah,
So people associate themselves, with the people Long Island, and people from the five boroughs actually have lineage. Like myself, I have relatives in the Bronx. I used to go to the Bronx every other week, right on Hoe Avenue, South Bronx. I stayed in the Bronx. You feel me? So, the city was never a foreign territory for me. You know what I mean? And as I got older, I lived in Harlem for many years. I lived in the Bronx. Matter of fact, I lived in the Bronx till just recently. You know what I'm saying? Until I got placed in Long Island. I'm back on Long Island, but I lived in the Bronx for 12 years. You know what I mean? So,
know that.
like, I've never been foreign to New York City, or the five boroughs at all as an individual. But as it relates to the culture, when we started listening to it, and I think what happened was, and you can speak to a lot of my Long Island brethren in regards to how they started listening to, and my Queens brethren too, the rap tapes, the tapes that were being made, like Cold Crush, like the Fantastics, all the early MCs that were rapping, Charlie Chase and them, how they were doing their thing out there, right? And then they spawned all these other DJs like DJ Divine, King Charles, all these other DJs, right? And all that music came to Long Island and Queens through cassette tapes.
Yeah, cassette tapes. Yep.
We know what it is, right? You see the brothers that walking down the street with the box. What do you think he was playing? He was playing that, he was playing the Yes Show, and you don't stop. He was playing the Melly Mells. He was playing the Grandmaster Cassis. He was playing the Scorpios. He was playing all that, right? So that's where we first heard it. That's when we first was like, oh, that's dope. And we can do that out here because no one out here is doing that. And we always had a DJ culture out here. I mean, what I am by trade as it relates to hip hop, you mentioned that I used to rap, but what I am by trade is a DJ. I DJed all my life. DJing, like when I see all these guys DJing now, I go, oh, okay. I mean, I can do that in my sleep because everything now is so automated. You can just press a button and all that. I mean, I DJ for real. Like I DJ on two turntables that weren't even the same kind of turntables. I use a volume control for a turn. You ever see one of those? Say you old enough to see this, right? You ever see one of those house stereos that like they had the TV in it and the stereo on top?
Yeah.
I use that to DJ with a turntable on top of that.
Wow.
So don't get it twisted. Like me and Dre, and I have to salute to my television partner, Dr. Dre. We formulated a little group and we call it The Concept. And we became inspired because at the time when we started growing, everybody, our music and what we did as DJs was well received by the community, and we started off like neighborhood DJs, just like anything else, and then when we graduated from high school, we went to college, and then that's when we met the great Chuck D, Hank Shockley, the Bomb Squad, and then that kind of made it clear to us to a degree that this is what we could do for a living. Because it was amazing how they were so organized. But they had an office space, they were building their own equipment. They had a recording studio. That whole thing was disgusting. And then when we went to my first time going to the city to meet with Russell Simmons and go to Rush Communications. You're familiar with Rush Communications, right? How they started having all the artists, and we met LL and all these other people. When I left that office, me and Dre were like, yo, forget what our parents are saying, talking about go to college. We can do this for a living. Right. So, so we embraced the culture when we were young, and we always had in the back of our mind what our parents said, go to college. So this is what we did. We went to college. I went to college. I played football because that was my thing. Sports was my thing, because that's my family's thing too. My family, football players that aspired to go pro. I have a cousin that played for the Steelers, and I have other cousins that played football on a smaller scale, right? And in big colleges, like Michigan and North Carolina State and stuff like that. So I said, okay, well, let me go and do the same thing. But then I got hurt in college. So now my natural thing to turn to was
music.
music, right? And I already had the groundwork laid out. And then Dre went to college, and he didn't want to go away to Cornell. Dre turned down a full scholarship to Cornell to do music. So we said, forget that. We're gonna do this music thing. We're gonna DJ and do this music thing. And we did very well as DJs. We DJed all over New York City. We used to DJ for Jessica Rosenblum. You know, you remember Jessica, right? Yeah, we used to do gigs for her. This is way before Flex and all that. You know what I mean? So we were doing okay. And then we decided to become artists, you know, and sign a deal at Def Jam, you know. And that whole thing started because when Dre went to Adelphi, we got together with Chuck and them to do a radio station called WBAU in Long Island. That's a whole nother story in itself. But that spawned the career of so many people. Like that should be documented, immensely documented.
Yeah, and I know it because, like I said, I'm from that time when, you know, original concept was recording and things of that nature. And
right.
I say to people that because back then it was definitely like, I guess the mindset was different because when you're doing something within hip hop, like it was like the groundwork, like going into the studio, buying a reel, getting the you know, having to do all of that. Because today all you need is a damn computer and a phone, and you can have a song playing on the radio within an hour. Back then,
it didn't take much work. It don't take much work right now. Said, you know that it doesn't take much work. You can right here, right now, while I'm talking to you, I can have on headphones. I can create a beat. I can do a song right here as I speak because it's all electronic. It's all automated. It's nothing.
Yep.
You know, even doing events is really easy. I remember us doing events through the radio station. Now, keep in mind, this radio station, if I can actually put this in perspective for you, we're 20 years old, 1920, right? We have the full run of a radio station. Now, keep in mind, if anyone is when everyone watches this, when I say college radio, if they know anything about college radio, they know college radio didn't really transmit outside of the campus itself because it just didn't have the firepower to transmit. They didn't have the wattage. They didn't have it. Our radio station transmitted from Coney Island. You can hear our radio station all the way out in Coney Island, all the way to Central Islip, Long Island, which, for those who are not familiar with Long Island, that's like way past Nassau County, way past Queens, out in Suffolk, past where Rakim lives, past where EPMD lives, it was Central Islip, far. So now we have that much land to cover, and everybody from those two areas and in between can hear everything that we create.
And that was big.
That was big. That was everything. Yep. You kidding me? Like, you actually have a real radio station and you're 18. Like, think about that. So Chuck, myself, Dre, Hank, Keith Shockley, salute. You know, I mean, I can go on for days. Flav, Wildman Steve, Mr. Bill Stephanie. We took advantage of that. We made our own songs. Right, we produced our own songs. We played our own songs. We play all the new songs, and at the time, the new songs were LL Cool J. It was the Fat Boys. It was Run DMC. I mean, when Suck MCs came out, we were playing the hell out of that, you know. So, and that's how myself and Dre, Chuck and Flav, Leaders of the New School. I thought everybody got deals because everybody was listening to WBAU. The industry was listening to that.
Yeah.
You know, to find new talent, to see what was popping, to see, you know, it was the focal point every Monday night between 10 and 1. Like, we have to watch this show, or we have to listen to this because this is important to the culture, right? So, and who knew that many years later, that same energy as it relates to what people had to actually watch and be part of would be duplicated on the MTV Raps. Very strange.
Yeah,
This is all before internet and everything.
I
So
was gonna say yeah because that was definitely a big time, and I know that even back then, did you now being involved because I typically ask questions of about at the beginning of because I always label it the commercialization of hip hop because like we didn't see
right,
we saw it even though it was local, like local was everything to us because that's all we knew, and
right.
hip hop didn't reach that scale yet. So did you did you even imagine hip hop even being on MTV? Because MTV was definitely a big thing. Did you even imagine hip hop to be to reach the global scale that is currently on?
No, and no one did. Like you wouldn't even thinking that big. Like if you tell me and that you were thinking that hip hop was going to be so big and it was going to be the number one music art form in the world back then, I would tell you that you're lying to my face because that's not the truth. Because no one knew. Because what vehicle did you have to make it that big? There was no vehicle. There was no internet. There was no, the growth process was different. It was about um, keep this in mind, Seth, and you probably are up to speed on this. Me and Dre, when we first went to college, we were still DJing, by the way, and we were becoming producers of music, right? We used to DJ prominent events, and I'm talking at college. You always do the events for the sororities and the fraternities, and you always do those type of events. But they didn't want us to play. They told us specifically. They said, "Do not play hip hop. Don't
Exactly.
play it. We don't want to hear Run DMC here. We don't want to hear that. We don't want to hear Spoonie G. We don't want to hear Melly. We don't want to hear Melly Mel and Scorpio. We don't want to hear that." So you couldn't possibly think that the culture was going to have some sort of growth worldwide because it could have been stymied right there because our own people were saying we don't want to hear it, right? So I just couldn't. You can't tell me that you can conceive that this was going to be some sort of grandiose kind of culture that took over the world. It just wasn't happening at the time. But you were happy in your space,
Yeah,
alluding to what you said about your being local and being happy. You were happy in your space, right? So that's what we did, and we just kept pushing the envelope. And at that point in time, what we talking? We're talking 80, 85,
yeah, 85.
84,
Yeah,
86. Record labels started developing. They started coming out with new songs every week.
yeah.
Between 84 and 87, there was so many rap artists coming out. It was crazy. You know, I mean, it wasn't just Def Jam. It was Sleeping Bag. It was Select. It was Profile. It was, I mean, the list goes on, right? Yeah. So, and the cool thing about music back then, unlike today, and I'm not a today basher, by the way.
I
There's
am.
a lot of music.
Yeah,
I,
I am most of the time.
I can't. You can't, man. You just can't
I
bash
know, I
today.
know,
For
I know.
you can't bash today without invoking any intelligence into it. That's what I don't like about some of us. We just say we don't like this because, but you got to, let's put a little intelligence to it. Let's think in terms of why this is something you don't like. You know, but I hear a lot of the old school guys say, "Well, I just don't like it. I'm not into." Well, then explain to me why you don't like it. Explain that because some of the stuff that I hear is very creative. You know, it's not all bad. It's like nothing is all bad.
Nah,
You
not
know,
at all.
um,
And we
but yeah,
don't want to sound like our old uncles growing up. When we used to do this, y'all couldn't do it. We don't want to sound that way. Even though we do at times without realizing, but we don't want to we don't
right.
want to do that.
You do not. You find yourself being exactly like your uncle. Oh, you ain't gonna never get nowhere with that. There, you should be doing these slow jams. You don't know what you're doing, right? Like Lorenzo in the movie, the NWA movie. Oh, y'all should be doing those slow jams. You ain't getting nowhere with doing that. That's exactly how you sound when you do that. Come on, man. Then you wonder why you left behind. You can't do that.
Exactly.
If I have any criticism as it relates to the new music, though, said I just think that a lot of the reason why the old music has found a place is not just because of the generation that it spoke to. It was so different you know, everybody was so different.
Yeah.
You know, like you know, you didn't have 10 artists coming out, you know, doing the same thing, having the same cadence,
Mm-mm.
you know, talking about the same things in their music. Even the music itself is rehashed. Like, you know, the composition of the music is rehashed. You know, um, it's just a different artist, maybe wearing a different outfit, and
Yeah.
that in itself is kind of pigeonholes the music into things that we don't want. We want you always want to be progressive. You want to be different. I mean, keep in mind something between '84 and '87. Look what came out during that time. I
Yeah.
mean, you're talking. I mean, the difference between Run DMC, the difference between Tribe Called Quest, the difference between Queen Latifah. You know, you're talking
But it's
Eric B.
funny.
and Rakim, Big Daddy Kane, huh?
I think the good thing about, because I guess when we were coming up, because, and I think it was specifically with New York, you know, with the boroughs, because, you know, like you said, the Big Daddy Kanes and the Karis ones, like we all came
Right.
up at the same time, but everybody, I don't think that anybody wanted to be different. It's just that we had different expressions because we grew up all in different areas and we had
That's
different tastes.
fact.
So,
That's
you know,
facts. And I agree with that. I agree with that 100%. You know, because KRS's experience coming up wouldn't be like Tribe Called Quest's experience. That's just totally different. Right. And it's because of where they're from.
yeah,
Interesting.
definitely.
Yeah, I agree with that.
And if you think about it, even because I'm going to say specifically because of what I know, even in the Bronx, if you're coming from the Soundview area or you're coming from Bronx River, you still had, because even back then we were territorial as far as
That's right.
how we did things. So when hip hop
Right.
to get that rise, even graffiti writers and the way you dance, it was definitely different because of the areas. And it's funny because
Mhm.
growing up in the Bronx, we had factions where it was still people didn't want to be that the type that somebody down the block was, simply because, like I said, it was territorial, and we didn't. I don't think it was planned that way. It was just that that's how we were, and I'm pretty sure in Long Island it was definitely different because Long Island was definitely bigger and more spacious than, like, you know, actually everywhere else, because Long Island was an actual island when it, even though Manhattan's an island, but Long Island was
Well, Long
so.
Island. Let me tell you, due to the fact you're from the Bronx, and I do have a platform here that I can discuss this. Let me explain to you, and some of my brethren might have a different take on it, but this, from my perspective, let me tell you how this was.
Yeah,
Long Island is divided up just like Queens or Manhattan or anything else. There's a South Side and there's a North Side. You know, there's an East and West, right? And a lot of these, there's a handful of towns, especially back then, that were predominantly black.
yeah,
I'm not going to invoke Hispanics at this time. I'm just speaking about African Americans. They were predominantly black. A lot of these families migrated from the five boroughs, right?
yep,
Just like the Murphys, Eddie Murphy's family, they came from Brooklyn. You know, a lot of my family came here from the Bronx, right? So they migrated here, and that territorial energy that you're mentioning developed here throughout these black neighborhoods. So you had um, areas like Roosevelt,
yeah,
where Public Enemy is from, where Eddie Murphy is from, where even Howard Stern's family is from the Belt. Dr. J, right? Then you have Hempstead, you know, then you have, you know, where I'm from, Westbury. Then you have
Wyandotte.
Wyandotte, where Rakim's from, you know, then you have Brentwood, where EPMD is from, you know. Um, so you have these areas, right? And they're black. And then they fight. They were, when I was still in middle school, they would fight each other. Because they had gangs out here too. Just like they had in the city. It wasn't in the black spades, you know, but
Yeah,
it were Long Island gangs out here. And they would fight each other. So that territorial energy transcended time.
yeah,
You know, when the gangs were still going, there was still the territorial energy in regards to how they lived their life. Because honestly, um, back in the day when Roosevelt again, where Chuck and them were from, they were the first people out here that started shooting people. They were people, they were cutting people, but they had always carried knives. They rode in posses. That whole energy from the city came out there through them, and it's spread. You know, and every town had to have the same thing. Okay, everybody was like, okay, well, you got your group, I'm gonna have my group. We're gonna fight, blah blah blah, and then it translated in the music too, right?
Definitely.
So that's how it was back then. You know, and people from the city don't really pay too much attention to it because I can guarantee you, not too many people from the city don't even know what areas are in Long Island anyway. They blanket it like it's one big piece of land, but it's so
I'm not
not.
gonna lie. I do that. I've done that.
Okay, it's so not because you know there are areas in Long Island that the brothers do not frequent. I'm just keeping it 100. They just till this day they don't do that. So it's a different thing, you know. And that was so funny. And being from Long Island, said honestly, you know, I grew carrying this kind of stigma in my head, like I know my cousins, they lived in the Bronx. I had cousins, you know, that lived in Queens, right? And I used to like, okay, I'm from Long Island, but at some point you didn't have the well, how can I say it? You didn't have the urban satisfaction of saying, okay, I'm from Long Island and making it stick, right? You didn't have the same pride, you know, as being black, right? So you know, it became kind of crazy until I was on MTV and I actually flew my first time going to California and going to Compton. And I'm driving through Compton, right? And we all in the van and I'm looking around. And in my mind, I'm looking around. I'm like, okay, this, you know, this is a house, right? There's no huge buildings, right?
Yeah.
But this is the house. The front, you know, that has the patchy grass. Same thing in my neighborhood. There's this dude in the front yard lifting weights. Okay, right? There's pit bulls out there. Same. If I took a picture of that and took a picture of where I live, same energy, right? There are gangs in my neighborhood growing up, same thing. So why is Long Island depicted as being like this thing, like, oh, because it's not urban? It's because, and only because, New York City is so unique in its urban activity that no one, even Long Island or Jersey or nowhere else, can even compete with that.
Yeah,
Nobody.
I'm not confirmed because
New
even
York City is an animal in its own of its own. That's why it's probably the greatest city in the world, but it's totally different than anywhere else. I mean, you could name them all: New Orleans, you know, any place, you know, Haitian town in Florida, anywhere, any hood you want to name, 8 Mile, I don't care where. New York City
I
is
would tell you,
different.
being a Bronx resident, like finding out like there's actual like ghettos in like Westchester, Long Island, even in Connecticut, it was like it didn't make sense because like from
Because
our environment and from our viewings, this is all we know as far as. And I didn't grow up in a ghetto, but there was ghetto neighborhood. I grew up in the Soundview area where it was bad and things of that nature. So, like you said, I'm not thinking Long Island's like that. I'm not even thinking Westchester's
right.
like that. So it's
But
like
nobody thinks that. That's the best. That's the funniest part because it's so in your mind. The first thing you think Long Island, you're thinking honestly. First thing you think of Long Island, you're thinking white.
trees, grass.
You're thinking
Yeah,
privilege. You're thinking
yep.
privilege. You're thinking there's a house. You're thinking okay, well shoot, if I had like you know, you might have grew up in a tenement, aka the project, aka you know impoverished in some sense, right? So you're looking at this person that well he got a house. Why is he acting stupid, right?
Exactly.
You know, that's why, you know,
Exactly.
but that's understandable. Truth be told, that is totally understandable. I can wrap my mind around that. But what I never understood is how as you grew older and understood life and you've seen how there's a ghetto and a hood in every city,
Every state.
every area, every state, you know, but but none of them. And I'm talking everywhere. There's nothing like the 5 boroughs, bro. Absolutely nothing. And I've traveled the world. I can tell you that for a fact.
Yep.
So when people in the boroughs in Brooklyn, when someone say I'm from Brooklyn, I'm from the Bronx, I go, okay, you're right, because y'all run shit. You can tell anybody that shit, you know, anybody, and that's just what it is. And you know, New York City wears the crown. Salute.
It's the aura. It's definitely the aura. Definitely the aura.
Period.
So let me.
Period.
You know what? You know, I liken hip hop too, as you say, like the neighborhoods that we grew up in, because there's different factors, there's different cultures within those neighborhoods, and you know, both of us coming up in the hip hop culture, we've seen, been involved, and witnessed many different things, and with that, as anything in life, things change. Now, coming from, because like I said, we have different stories when it comes to the culture of hip hop because we grew up in different areas.
Right.
Knowing, since we're still both involved in hip hop, maybe not from an artist standpoint, how do you feel about the culture that's being portrayed? And I'm always going to say commercially because we both know that hip hop is definitely a lifestyle, but you know, hip hop is so ingrained in society where it's involved in politics, it's involved in art, it's involved in anything breathing. Where, like I said, there's not necessarily a standard in hip hop because
I think that's our fault. That's myself, Ed, and Dre's fault. You know, when I think about it, I think in terms of, you know, before our show, hip hop was a regional thing.
yeah,
You
definitely.
know, the world was doing exactly what me and you were talking about as it relates to just New York City, Long Island, Jersey. The world was doing that at
Yeah,
that point, right? In '88 and '89, the world was regional. There were regional video shows.
yes,
You know, Ralph was doing this thing here. Ralph was king here, right? And
definitely.
salute to Ralph, by the way. Um, but when Yo hit the scene, things were no longer regional.
Yeah, it became
Yo
global.
MTV Raps Yo MTV Raps was the hip hop CNN. It was the central point. It was
Yeah,
what everybody had to watch, and whatever happened on Yo is what people took to heart. Is what people took back to their city,
yep,
you know, and did that deviation of it, you know, and you know, Yo MTV Raps became so popular, you know, it went to different countries, and it helped format how people were actually shooting videos, what clothes people wore, what president to elect. You know, Young
yeah,
T. Ross was integral in Rock the Vote. You know, and the reason why, you know, part of the reason why, you know, Obama got elected is because, you know, we the precursor was the Rock the Vote thing, correct?
yes,
With us, and you know, and the industry as a whole, you know, but we broadcasted it. You know, so it's when I think about what you're saying right now as it relates to that, I think in terms of how Young T Raps was highly influential in regards to the change of the culture. I mean, when we first started, people were actually doing videos for $10,000.
yeah,
At the end of Young T Raps, you were doing $1 million video.
yeah. I'm about to say, yeah,
That's a huge change in the culture. It's a huge change in the money. That's a huge change in marketing. And you know, rap artists became stars. Not saying that they weren't stars before, but these are now they're worldwide stars on a
yeah,
greater scale. Like everybody's a star, you know. So it became a totally different thing, you know. Yo was different,
but adding on
you
to what
know.
you're saying, artists started like creating whatever they were doing their art based on trying to get on MTV Raps.
That's the done thing, right? They tailor their videos to that and everything else, you know, without question. That's why they made those expensive videos.
Yeah,
They wanted to compete with, you know, other artists. They can't come with a cheap video. You know,
mm-mm.
the label wouldn't even allow it. You know, you
Yeah,
know that. You know that very well, right?
Yep, exactly.
You definitely know that part. Definitely, you know. So the culture now, as it relates to what we were just discussing, I just think that um, growth growth of the culture should be, should invoke the intelligence that I spoke about earlier.
Yeah.
You know, and that really means everything. You know, um, because if you want the world to continue to follow you, if you want the world to continue to like embrace us as a culture overall, we have to you have to grow with the world. You have to change with it. You know, because another form of music or another art form or another culture will take over that energy. You understand? You can't just remain stagnant or doing the same thing. You know, you have to mature. You know, hip hop is doing its best to mature. You know, but that's not always the case. And I think what's lacking the most as it relates to the culture is that the younger audience, not even the audience, the younger artists haven't embraced what came before them. If you're a baseball player, right? Say, for instance, you go to a farm league. I don't care what kind of baseball player you are. You know who Babe Ruth is, right?
Yeah.
If you're a football player, you know Lawrence Taylor. If you play his position, you know the history. If you run for president, you know who George Washington was. You know, if you're a rapper and don't know who DMC is from Run DMC, that's a problem for me.
Problem, exactly.
That's a problem. You know what I'm saying? Because to me, you're not embracing what got you there in the first place. Why are you even here? Why are you able to make money? You know, you don't even go to a job. You don't even go to any job not understanding what's required of you.
Exactly.
You go to a job and you have to understand, what's required of you. Why is the job here? You have to know some sort of history or some sort of. There's a playbook to this. There's a lot of artists that get involved with doing what hip hop, whatever hip hop energy that they put out, and they put out songs and they do all these things, but they totally are devoid of what happened before them, and that's going to be the downfall of our culture if that doesn't change. You understand? They have to have some sort of history, and I love when new artists, go back and they do songs with artists that were before them. I forgot some group. I forgot what group it was. They did a song with Melly Melon and Scorp at one time a few years ago. And there's artists that do stuff with Missy Elliott, and that to me shows that they have a sense of what came before them and why they feel it's important. For them to badger or disrespect what came before them, it's sort of like that promotes the ignorance to me of the culture. It truly does.
I agree with you 9,000%, but I'm also going to put the blame on some of the older artists from my experience and what I witnessed when some of the younger artists were going up to. I'm not even going to name names. I'm not going to go out like that. But
I'm not going. But I can name a couple myself.
Yeah,
I'm not going to say it either. But
yeah. And like I said, I do agree with you, and I think that I see that some of the artists who became the it men going to advice for some of the people that were and hip hop didn't reach that global scale yet. And I see the lack of respect that some of these artists have for the ones coming up, where the ones coming up when they got that title, they were like, fuck you, because when I came to you, you wasn't trying to hear me. Then they kind of had the mindset when they got to that position and they kind of took over the same mindset. And I'm like, that's where the problem lies, because some of the artists that came up like on their own were like, you know what, I came on my own. For the ones coming after me, you have to come up on your own, because that's how I came up there. So that's why I say I kind of I get it.
That's bad. That's bad energy. That's bad energy. And
exactly.
I don't know if my phone had cut off a little. Hold on, but my phone had cut off. Sorry, sir. I hope it didn't record that, but it dropped out. It went black. But anyway, just so you know. But yeah, that's bad energy, bro. That's bad energy, because you're not thinking. You're not thinking in the future. You're thinking about you and only you, and you're not thinking about how that affects the culture overall. Because You're not thinking about that, and that's bad because you manifest that 100 times, and then what happens, right? You don't let anybody that barely knows what they're doing go out and like to do it without trying to teach them or guiding them. It's our responsibility not to tell them what to do, but but at the same time, it's our responsibility to guide their energy
in the right
you
direction.
understand? Right, in the right direction. That's really important. Like if we're not doing that, what are we doing? Like what do you what? And how do you expect them? How do you expect their audience and them to embrace you after you do that? Like who you selling records to?
Can I deviate a little and kind of
Sure.
put the blame on part of the blame, not on you, Ed, or Dre specifically, but
right.
the fact that we know the gatekeepers from an entity like an MTV kind of having the leverage to push out the older artists and bring in the younger artists, and the younger artists knowing that and them catering to what an MTV would be looking for, as opposed to and like I said, not of course you, Dre, and specifically. I mean like the powers that be that are in position to, because T Money might be, hey, I want to embrace it, but so and so executive that pays that salary is going to be like, nah, we want to go in a different direction. So that's why when I say I want to deviate, not saying y'all specifically, because of course y'all are for the culture, but the people that are living off the culture. So I always say that blame can definitely go around to so many different places. But if I'm an artist trying to get on, and then I have the Electras and the labels telling me one thing because they're in cahoots with the MTVs and the VH1s, and yet me being one of the people that led the push to get rap in this position or hip hop in this position, but it's like, but if I have no money and this white guy is telling me that I need to do this so that way I can get paid to do this, and it kind of hurts the culture, but it's like, I'm sick of living in poverty, And
it's a catch-22. Yeah, I feel you. It's a catch-22. It's sort of like, MTV as an entity it was just like any other entity at the time.
Yeah, definitely.
They were following suit. Everybody was in cahoots with that.
Yeah.
Because they felt that there was more money in a younger market. They tried to keep hip hop young. They didn't embrace the fact that hip hop was growing.
Exactly, yeah.
I personally, and I think Ed and Dre too, when we discussed it, I think we had a conversation about it. We were talking in terms of how hip hop, should be like rock and roll. Rock and roll artists,
I was just about to say that
they perform until they got one foot in the grave. It don't matter. This is what you are. This is what you do. Run DMC, should always have done Las Vegas. Doug Neil Young, right?
Yep.
Or like Billy Joel, right? This is what hip hop is. It grows. When we did the Barclays Center in 2018, right? Now I distinctly remember we had 17,500 in the Barclays. Now keep this in mind. This is no promotions from the network, right? Very little. I think they promoted it first early and then just before. 17,005. Now keep in mind our demographic populated that place. The next day, Summer Jam was the next day. And they got 40-something thousand in Giant Stadium. So the metrics say support, the younger audience, because that's where all the dough is. But and no one's touching this demo because they feel that there's nothing there. But there's 17,500 people here that you did not promote for.
Exactly.
Right? So there is money there. You just ignoring that, it sort of harkens back to like it sort of harkens back to Lucky Luciano telling Dutch Schultz, you know, you wanted to go get nigga pennies, right? You heard the story, right?
Yep.
And Dutch was like, yeah, because that's money, you know, and you guys didn't want it. It's the same thing. There's money there, you know. So and it, oh wow. Okay, my internet connection had dropped out for a second. So yeah, bro. So that's crazy. That's what it is, you know. And everybody followed suit. And if you speaking of suit, if you were like, oh, you look the part, it got to the point where if you look the part and you can fit the suit, I'm gonna make a record with you because you know it's more about marketing than talent.
Yeah, definitely.
You know, so it's crazy.
I think the sad thing is that the bigger companies, the MTVs, the record labels, like for them, I think it was definitely about money, but I think it was about control because if you're dictating who can come up on the stage, you're always going to be able
That
to.
too.
And if they were smart enough, they would have taken a let's do it the rock and roll way because when Rolling Stone releases an album or any of these other older acts, they're going to get people that are committed fans to definitely still buy into it. But they changed the trajectory with hip hop because it's like, well, if we control who can come in, we'll always have control because the older artists won't be able to dictate what they can do the way these older rock bands can still dictate because like the Billy Joels and the Stings and all of them are still able to control it. Well, not Sting, but still able to control it because they still have that core audience. With hip hop, it's
true.
like we're going to tell you who the core audience is because we're still going to control it. And I say, and people always have a reason why hip hop was destroyed on that level. I'm like, no, the thing is, the gatekeepers knew what they were doing, but what they don't understand is they still could have kept control of the money and still allowed the older artists to still make the money and still have the younger artists. But they were so focused on destroying something that, like I said, but it is what it is because that's where we are right now, and we can't go back and say, okay, let's reinvent the wheel because it's definitely too late. But going forward, is it possible that like the Nicki Minaj's and the Lil Wayne's, the ones that's on the cusp of being that old artist that no one's going to care about from the mindset of the labels. Now we're always going to say that we're fucking with them, but when the labels are like, okay, we don't feel that they're fucking with you anymore, so you know what, we're getting rid of you. Do you think that it can still be salvaged where we can get that in the same vein of the rock and I can't even say R&B because R&B is a little. It seems as if it's just black. If you want to be
right.
Right.
R&B is black. Rhythm and black. That's what that is.
Yeah.
But no, hip hop. Yeah, it can be. But it's it's so deep, man. This is a whole deep thing. It's in regards to not just music culture, the black culture. As it relates to unity, as it relates to working together, as it relates. I mean, I could go on for days, bro, and us talking about that because that's a deep question. The answer to your question is yes, emphatically. But can it actually happen? I don't know. I don't think so because I mean, you're not. It's very seldom you're going to have, and it's not like it hasn't been tried, but very seldom you're going to have powerful artists come together, for one particular cause to help the culture grow, without one person being so definitively ahead of the rest. Somebody is always going to try to win or be, the person in front of it, or, it can't even be like an even thing with everybody. Everybody's always going to try to be like, outdo somebody or be jealous or, it's just never it never works in regards to that. But the answer to your question is yes, but we just have to change our mindset. It's here. It's here. The changing of the culture starts here. How everybody thinks about what's going on. Because honestly, the hip hop culture is our culture. It's black music.
In theory, no.
But no, well,
Well,
yeah, in theory, but we created it. So I mean, I'm not talking about who actually owns it. We want to.
yeah,
That's another podcast. That's a whole nother podcast.
right.
But but we created this. So we should always think in terms of ownership collectively. You know, everything collectively, from health care to royalties. You know, I just watched this thing where Snoop said he got 1 million streams or something, and barely got
Yeah.
40. He didn't even get $40,000 from that. So it's sort of like, we need to think in terms of what we're doing, man. Collectively. It's just not just you know you know it's not just one of us that can do this all by itself. It has to be a collective
But but you know what?
effort.
As much as people hate Jay-Z, I think he was trying to do that with Tidal. I mean, I
Right,
don't know the exact business model on how or why it didn't work, but I think that he was onto something when he tried to get all the artists to collectively be involved. And I think that if that would have worked in the way that he may have looked at it, that could have been the
right,
start. Because, like you said, then you got people that's like, well, how come I didn't get my portion, or how come that, and this, and that? But I think he had the right mindset going into it, but probably the
right,
structure wasn't correct, or maybe the people, I don't know. But I
right,
think that's what he was alluding to, and
right. I mean,
maybe
that's quite possible. I mean,
yeah,
I can't speak on the title situation personally because I don't know enough about
yeah,
what
exactly,
his
yeah,
overall plan was. But if that was indeed the case, I mean, I can I don't know. I don't want to even speculate as to why it didn't work well, but it
yeah.
could be that. I mean, that
That's
could
what
be
off
a
the top of my head.
possibility.
I'm like, I think that maybe he probably thought in that vein where we could actually start controlling what we do with this. Like I said, like you said, I don't know the intricacies. I'm just thinking on a level of like looking at it from an outsider's point of view, saying maybe he was onto something that, or maybe the people running other companies prevented all that from happening because other people might have been
Right,
like, you know what, he's right, and then more it'd have been like a revolt, for lack of a better
right,
term. It would have been a revolt,
right,
and it may have worked. But you know what? I don't want.
right,
I want to kind of go a little off topic to because you mentioned something as far as with health, and I want to get into that because we're at a stage where the one thing I hate is when somebody does pass away, we say, "Oh, we got to start looking out for our health," and then the next week we're back to doing the things that some of us are dying from. Like I want to hear your thoughts on like on men's health specifically because we're men, but health in general because, like I said, fat school, like there's so many people that have passed away recently that, in theory, shouldn't have because even though we're older, we're still young in terms of life, and as black men, like what do you think we need to do to stay on the path where we're still healthy and we live into our 80s and 90s because we're doing the right thing because our grandparents and great grandparents lived to ages that
yeah.
nowadays
Those
50 is
they
old.
they different. But let me tell you something. God bless them because my father will be 90 years old in October. Right? They don't make people like him no more. They don't make. They, Listen, I'm a punk compared to my father, bro. My father is 90 and he does everything I do almost. And he's 90, bro.
Yeah,
He'll be 90. So I'm looking at it like it's not just about taking care of yourself. I harken back to what I said in the beginning of the podcast, talking about how you have to set your life up
yeah,
to be able to sustain your journey to be the best you can be in this culture. Because this culture will eat you up and spit you out. That you understand
def-
off the bat. Even
def-
if you're successful,
definitely.
it'll eat you up and spit you out. Right? Even if you're mega successful, they're gonna search to get rid of you.
Yep.
They're gonna find something to
We
try
have
to harm
many
you.
examples.
To hurt you.
Yeah, many examples. Yeah.
Right. So exactly. So what you need to do is first obtain a sustainable income. Go get a job, bro. Don't be afraid to work. Why does that make you look bad? Get a job. Because you can't do nothing without no money. Especially if you black, you so can't do nothing without no money. Go get a job, right? Educate yourself with the money you sustain, right? With money you obtain, rather.
Yeah.
Get it, educate yourself. Go back to school and do something, right? And that's even becoming dicey too now. Said you know that, right? Because with AI in effect and all these things growing, jobs are scarce as a mug, bro. There are very few jobs out there, and they're gonna keep decreasing.
Exactly.
So you have to figure out how to sustain an income, educate yourself, and find what you love doing, and educate yourself and try to make money at it.
Yeah.
God bless you if you're making money in entertainment. Then you living a life now. Now you chilling, and especially if you own it. If you're a producer or you're doing something, you're making money fine. Long as it's sustainable, long as you can depend on. Not like you got to keep calling somebody for your fucking check. Like, yo, where my check at? It's been 3 weeks. That's not sustainable income. Okay, we get caught up because the entertainment money is a high. Cedric, you know this, right? That money is a high. You get that $50,000, $100,000 check. We say, ooh, I can get another one of them. Hold on. You might not get another one of them, bro. Uncle Sam want a piece of that check. The state want a piece of that check. You got bills that you piled up over the last year. And then you might get this much out of it. You're not always going to get that check.
And you got to
so you need a sustainable.
Yep.
Right. You're going to buy a new car, right? You're going to do foolish things with the money or things that you have to do. Sustainable income. Next thing you got to get is to make sure your health is clear. With a sustainable income, usually it comes with a health insurance, right? Go to the doctor, bro. Don't think the health insurance card is just in your pocket to carry weight.
Yeah.
Collecting dust. You need to go to the doctor. Anytime you feel well. Don't feel well, rather. Go to the doctor. Don't go home and drink a ginger ale. You're not doing that. Because that's not going to help you.
Get those.
You need to go to the doctor and check yourself.
Get
right.
Checkups.
So those things you have to do those things, bro. Those things to set you up so you're able to be like over here. Now you want to do your career. So learn about what you're trying to do. Know the history. Know business-wise, learn it. And then from that, have your job fuel that, and you're in good health. You have all those things combined. Now you're able to go. When your opportunities come, you're able to leapfrog into it. And you're able to sustain a life. And you'll be around here a longer time. You know what wins? In any form of business or anything? Consistency.
Yep, definitely.
Be consistent. Be there all the time. Then it works for you. And a lot of people don't look at it that way. A lot of people don't think about their health. A lot of people think, well, I gotta go. And you know the term that kills me the most as it relates to that is I'm grinding. You're grinding what? You're grinding yourself to death. That's what you're doing. You're not paying attention to what you need to be doing. It's good to work hard, but we got to work smart. You ever heard of that term? That term is important too. And
the funny thing, like when you grinding means like when you're grinding like diamonds and stuff, like you're grinding stuff down to non-existence or to create something else. And you're not creating something else.
This is very true.
You're grinding down. So, and people don't understand.
Very true.
When they use
that's very true, sir. You're grinding it to non-existence. Right. So you got to be able to do those things. If you keep that trilogy going, you're going to grow in your jobs and you're going to make more money.
Yep.
You're going to sustain your health. And then you're going to be around long enough to, take advantage of the opportunities that you're trying to obtain in the culture.
Definitely.
It's simple.
And people don't see that. And they need to see it.
Yeah, you got to. Yeah, that's how that works.
I want to, since you just, and this is the thing. I want to give props to Sadat X, and the reason why I'm bringing him up because when you talk about getting the job, I'm actually
working in the hospital.
I'm talking to him. I'm talking to him in 3 days. So it's like, and looking at him, like I said, when you was talking about getting the job, I thought about him immediately because I'm like, first of all, good friend, and like he does it, and not only does he do it, he's showing people he's doing, because people always look down if you're a rapper or you're on TV, whatever, and your career isn't at the top of the game like you were used to. But then it's like you have to stay at that level. And I'm glad he's showing people like, nah, I'm still grinding. I'm not grinding, excuse me. I'm still working. I'm still doing my thing.
Right.
Life still continues, because you're not always going to be on stage. You're not always going to be doing that. And like I said,
He's not a little boy. Said he's not a
exactly,
little boy. He's a grown ass man. He got a job.
and
You
I'm
know,
talking
I don't know. I don't know if
so
Sadat got kids or whatever, but he could,
he does,
he might have kids and all that.
he
Come
does.
on, man. What are you doing? What are you talking about? Because all these terminologies are what we fall prey to.
Exactly.
Well, on grinding. Oh, he fell off. Oh, he's not relevant. Just knock it off. Just knock it the fuck off. Okay? That's what you're sort of like you're a pollutant to your own culture when you say that. You know? I watch, like just like, and I will salute the Nas too for putting out all these new albums that are coming out by all the old school artists, Slick Rick and everybody else, right. Salute, man. Because that's what's needed, because we need, and now if anybody can hear me at the sound from the sound of my voice, platforms need to play the music so it can be sold, so it can be heard. This generation doesn't want to have to go streaming to find the music. They want to just hear it when they come on the radio, or they want to hear it where it's accessible to them. Definitely. You understand? Then they'll support it. I want concerts to be put out there by promoters to support the culture. Support this level. You understand? Because it exists. How many artists have been coming out with new music from this generation? They do it every couple months, man. I mean, Redman come out with a record every other day, I think.
Redman is still phenomenal in his delivery, and man.
That's right. And I dare a lot of these artists to even touch him. They can't see him. Can't see him.
But what I'm seeing, what I enjoy seeing is when some of the older artists are still selling out shows that some of these new artists can't.
Yeah, that's very interesting. And you know what's so funny? I think Eric Sermon said something a couple months ago in regards to the longevity of a lot of these new artists' catalog, that it's not going to be worth anything, and that might be true. That might be very true. So yeah, man, it's just crazy. But we just need to honestly focus, and it's not really all about my generation. It's about the culture as a whole.
The culture itself, exactly.
And we just need to invoke intelligence, man, in what we're trying to do moving forward. I mean, that's essential. Otherwise, we're gonna lose out, man. The culture is gonna die.
Definitely.
The Cote de la Soul hip hop will be dead. That is a fact.
Officially dead.
Officially. No question.
I do appreciate your time, but before we go, I want people to know, because you have your own platform as well now, and like I said, I know we had a conversation, but I want you definitely to let the people know that what you're doing now.
Well, I have a podcast. It's called the T Money Podcast Joint. It's on YouTube. The nature of my show is a teaching tool for those hip hoppers that are interested in knowing about the culture. Right now we're in our third season, and we have over 60 shows, man, with a lot of the veterans for the hip hop culture, and some that aren't veterans, and we have people who actually are related to the culture. We have actors and we have singers who actually have been part of the culture historically. And watch it, man. It's very entertaining, man. It's myself, Stax Cadero, who is my co-host. Stax, man. And we doing our thing, bro. We doing our thing. You know what I mean? So watch it. We on YouTube, man. We shoot every first Saturday of every month. And we're soon going to be doing a show in Times Square too. We're doing a live broadcast in Times Square. So stay tuned for that. All right.
Is there anything else you got going on, or you're about to do that you want to mention or talk
about? Well, I don't want to like broadcast some of the stuff that I'm doing, but just watch out for what me, Ed Lover, and Dr. Dre are doing, because we're still going to be doing some things. Those things are in the works. So yeah, man. Just be mindful that this culture is still viable. That's all I gotta tell you.
And as long as some like people like you are around, it's still going to keep going and going in the direction it needs to go in because, and like I said, I know that us older heads, we kind of like sometimes make it seem as if like the culture, the generation coming up are not doing the right thing, and that's not right. It's just that, like
Yeah, like I said before, I'm not a hater of the new. I'm not a hater at
yeah,
all. I'm just I like, but if I do have criticisms,
yeah,
even like I have criticisms of my generations, like you were saying, how a lot of some of the old school artists, they're just not, I don't know, interested in working with the new artists for whatever reason, and they actually kind of they treat them like no, you do it yourself. That's not the energy that you should be invoking.
each one.
That's not a good look, not at all. You know?
So
Yeah.
and like I said, even if some of the things that is coming out musically or even the way, I always say to people that the good thing about hip hop is has always been based on the environment and like what you feel about. Because like I said, growing up in St. Louis, growing up in Miami, growing up in New York, we all have different upbringings, and if it's part of the same culture, we need to embrace it, even if we don't like it. And
Right.
as the older ones, we need to guide the ones that want to be guided. Because there's some people that's like, "Fuck y'all, we don't need y'all." As long
That's right.
you make it a culture
That's right.
grow, I'm with you. Do it your way, but make sure that because a lot of these people that have that mindset when they get older, they think about what they've done and say, you know what, let me correct myself or let me correct the people coming up behind me. And I can appreciate that because
Right.
I've seen it myself. Some people that were like, "Fuck y'all." Now it's like, you know what? I'm thinking differently now because I've
Yeah, that's
seen
facts.
different things. That's
That's
what hip hop.
facts, man.
That's what
I've
hip hop
seen it too.
is.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Exactly.
it.
So I tell people, you know what? Some of these people who might be lost now, they're gonna get on the right road because we all go through it. As when we're younger, we're going to have that attitude like, I'm gonna do what I want because I can. And then when you're in
Right.
the game, you're like, you know what? I gotta correct what I've done wrong in the past and try to
Mhm.
right the wrong with the people coming up. So I can definitely appreciate the
Right.
people. Cause like I said, there are some people I know personally. I'm looking at them like, yeah, okay. Now they're like, yo, let's work together. Let's do this. I see the vision now. This is that and the other. So I can appreciate that. That's the reason. That's the reason why I don't look down at people that are going in a direction that they shouldn't go down. But some of them come right back, and it's like, let's get on the right path. So shout outs to
Yeah,
all the people that
let's
have.
multiply that. Shout out to them. Be facts. Let's multiply that times 100,000. Let's do it. You know what I mean?
If we,
Because everybody needs to have that positive energy. You
when we
know?
embrace them, they get there quicker. But if we dismiss them, that's when they go off on their own tangent. And then, like I said, that hurts the culture more so than hurting them.
Does it ever? Does it ever? That's facts.
You know. But
That
I
is
definitely
fact.
appreciate your time and everybody definitely check out I'm gonna say the T Money podcast joint on
Mhm.
YouTube. Um, as I always state, I'm just trying to make sure I didn't miss anything because like I said, there's so much within you that people can definitely gather information from, which is one of the reasons why I
No
want to
question.
talk to you and definitely promote what you're doing and make people realize that my friends are better than yours. Your
That's
friends are
possible.
better than your friends, T Money.
That's quite possible, sir. That's quite possible, my brother.
Once again, I hope
Good
that
seeing you, man.
definitely everyone that tuned in, I hope that you definitely got a lot out of it because any people that I do speak to, I definitely get out of it, even knowing the people that I do know, and I want you to get something out of it. Once again, my friends are better than yours, and if you don't think so, present your friends, and I'll prove myself. So, T Money, thanks for your time. Good luck with any and everything, and I got your back. So, if you need me for anything, definitely call on me, and I'm there.
My
And
brother.
uh,
Thanks a
until
lot,
next,
sir. I appreciate you, brother.
no problem,
All
anytime.
right.
The industry
All right.
cosign
Talk to you
out until the next time. And
later.
as I usually do, let me try to hit this button. I got to find the button first, and so that way. And I
All
found
right.